All right.
John. All right.
So we've got the prognostications. I got 3 of them this week, and the 2 of them are relatively small and fast and interesting, but one's really complicated. So I'm going to start off with that one while we're still got energy.
Right.
But it's complicated because I've actually explained this one to a few people trying to practice before the show, because it involves a lot of crossways thinking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the past and describe the restaurant industry 1,000 years ago. It didn't exist by then, by the way, back then. And then I'm going to explain why that you could not have predicted restaurants 1,000 years ago. And explain why you're not going to predict the next round of employment once AIs take most of the current jobs away. But it will be there, and why that's so unintuitive. That's my goal.
Okay.
But I need to first explain what a restaurant is, because I know everyone listening is going, well, I know what a restaurant is. Well, unless you've been in the restaurant industry, like owned a restaurant or been heavily involved in its marketing and some of the other aspects, it's not as obvious as it might seem, because restaurants are not in the industry of serving you food. Don't get me wrong, that's the product that you're buying. But if people were simply interested in life-sustaining calories, they'd go to the grocery store. It's a really
just buy butter.
Right, they just buy some kind of food, and it's not a good, cost-effective way to get life-sustaining calories. What it is, though, is a very entertaining way to get that food. Because when you're in the restaurant industry, you are in the entertainment industry. You go there because you're entertained by the flavor of the food, the atmosphere of the restaurant, the sound and other characteristics, the service that you receive. And each restaurant has its own take on what that entertainment is.
Yeah, it's an experience as well.
It's an experience, right. It's everything from the nostalgia effect you get from going to Shakespeare's, but also I could talk about hours about how well they do their soundscape inside Shakespeare's, because it's a very echoey place, but just enough so that it feels full even when it's not full, because of the sound, how they do the sound there. But also you got to also be personalities, like Arnie's here in town is very good at hiring very strong personalities that for the wait staff. Which gives you an entertainment factor there as well. You feel like more like a part of the group. And there's a lot of different elements to it. And if a place doesn't appeal in the entertainment direction, and there's a lot of ways to do it, they go under. And I've seen that so many times in Columbia. Quite a few places that go, well, we'll just serve good food cheaply. Well, you can kind of get away with that, but it's got to be more. It always has to be more. Those places fold so fast. Because it's not a utility. It's an entertainment industry. And with that in mind, let's go back 1,000 years when there was no such thing as a restaurant. In fact, I think the first restaurant occurred in the 1800s in France, was the first one that existed.
Wow.
Now, 1760s, as it was the very first confirmed restaurant to ever exist. So what did you do before then? Well, there really wasn't anything before then. The closest you could come to a restaurant prior to that period of time would have been an inn or a tavern. But inns and taverns, unlike things we call inns and taverns nowadays, an inn and the tavern is a restaurant. But back then, the purpose of the food they were going to serve you if you got there was the same as the kind of food they served to the horse that you dropped off at the inn. They gave it survival food. You didn't go there because you liked the food. In fact, there was lots of literature about how horrible the food was, because you weren't willing to pay to have a person do anything fancy with it. The idea was to not die, because oftentimes when you're traveling from, say, one end of Europe to the other end of Europe, that's a 5 or 6 day trip, and you're traveling all day. You're there to stop, get the food so you're not starving, and get on to the next day with your horse and keep on going.
And there's no choice.
There's no choice. You get what's in the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's been in there for 8 hours, you're eating 8-hour-old food, because that was not the selling point of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about a modern restaurant, what you're getting is someone's coming in, you're going to someone else's building. They are providing an entertaining atmosphere. They're providing with the food that tastes really good, so you're paying for the cook, for the production of the food in the big way, and they clean up after you. Now, there is one place you could have gotten that even 1,000 years ago. All you had to do was be the king. And then you would have a staff of people who did that for you. Servants and or slaves, depending on what time period and area of the world you're in. You had people that were, beneath you that did those things for you. It's a very much a 1%er type of thing to go to what we would now consider a restaurant. Of course, even then it wasn't really a restaurant because generally it was done in your own castle. So even there it kind of falls apart. But if you'd gone back 1,000 years and tried to describe the year 2016 and say, 1 out of 10 people in this country is in the restaurant industry, and they go, well, what's that mean? Well, what they do is just like the servants at the king's castle, they make fancy banquets with lots of entertainment and they clean up after everybody. 1 out of 10 people in the world do that. They would have gone, that makes no sense because
there's too many kings.
There's not that many kings. There's usually one king. He needs 30 people for that? How could 30 million people in this country out of 300 million be involved in the restaurant industry? Well, it's because your everyday person does it, buys it. Well, that makes no sense. That's crazy talk. And so even if you were a time traveler and could go back 1,000 years and start a restaurant, no one would go to it.
Because a lot of people didn't have any money either.
Right. So a lot of things changed, partly because of the Industrial Revolution. Actually, a lot of this, that date of, what did I say, 1860?
1760, I think.
That was on the early cusp of the Industrial Revolution. What changed was the world's economic structure changed at the same time. And what happened was, instead of 95% of the population being involved in food production, maybe only 20% was involved with it. So all the real jobs were gone. Because real jobs, if you think about it, are things that you need to do because they're a necessity of life. Now, ironically, nowadays people think of manufacturing jobs as real jobs, but most of those were really real jobs. You don't need the latest iPhone. You don't need
fight me
to make you don't need a tire for your car because you don't really need a car,
right?
Although really technically we now think of it as a need. All these things, the truth is it's less than 5% of the population now is involved in food production at all, and that's including all of the support industries.
Wow.
For food production. We are not living in a society that does things you need to do.
Okay.
To be blunt about it. And so what's going to happen is when this is my prediction for the future. Talk about this right. Let's talk about tires. Tires are expensive still. If AIs get involved in tire production, the price of tires could drop to the point where they're practically free.
They're essentially cost, right? The cost of the material.
Cost of the material, and the cost of the materials are dropping because we're already seeing stories where AIs are getting involved in the mining industry.
Yeah.
So the cost of things are going to drop to the point that what remains scarce is the things people want. That's the principle. Whatever remains scarce is what people want, and that's what people will buy, and that's what the industry will grow into. So I'm going to give you some examples of some industries that, generally speaking, are only done by extremely wealthy people, but could one day be a middle-class thing. I'm going to do the crazy one first, because I don't know if this one will really happen. With the current generation becoming more and more socially isolated because of social media and cell phones, they're not really, the young kids nowadays aren't talking to each other.
Right.
They're communicating, but it's not the same thing. And so they're becoming more and more socially isolated as a group. Having someone say hi to you in the morning is probably a very valuable thing. And you don't want your computer to do it. That's free. But hiring somebody to say hi to you in the morning could be a very nice thing at the beginning of your day.
So
now, if you think about it,
will keep their jobs.
Yeah, so baristas, yes. So you might be thinking, well, that's insane. No one's going to pay for that. But remember, whatever's remaining is what's valuable. That's probably an stretch, because I suspect you're right. The barista is a good example. It's probably not going to be just saying hi to you in the morning. It's going to be saying hi to you in the morning and serving you your coffee.
But if you don't have to leave because you telecommute your work and your necessities and food stuffs are delivered and your supply chain is completely self-contained and all of your transactions are electronic, you don't have to leave the house.
Right. As a necessity, you never need a human to get you your coffee.
And so people can actually be wound up sort of in their own private little castles where, they do a lot of FaceTiming or whatever you want to call it in 1,000 years from now, where they talk to people and they email and they chat and, who knows, 3D holograms, etc., immersive technologies. But they may not actually be in the same room breathing the same air as somebody for weeks on end.
Yeah. So you might, rather than doing the necessity of like going to the grocery store, you're going to the restaurant in the future, rather than having the duplicator make you your coffee from your solar cells on your roof, you hire someone to come by for 10 minutes and just, prepare some coffee right there, right in front of you. And it's kind of a social thing.
And have idle, spontaneous banter.
Yeah.
As opposed to necessities of whether it's education or workplace or I can totally see that, John. I see where you're coming from.
To bring John's prediction kind of on a much smaller scale than what John's talking about. Think of social media coordinators.
Yeah,
a social media is a new industry. It's obviously freed up a lot of time for a lot of people. But it has also created the job of a social media coordinator, which is something that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I've got two other, I'm going to go through them quickly, two other good examples. That's a good one, too. Aquarium or pet service. Rather than buying an aquarium and installing it in your house and trying to learn how they work, a person, when you're not at home, just shows up in your house and installs the aquarium, sets it up, and then comes by every few days and takes care of it. Now, some of the things are automatable and will be running by the AIs, but there's also going to be an oversight because it's a living thing. Someone's going to actually be also watching it remotely. But there's problems that only rich people see with that kind of service. In fact, that kind of service is available right now for the wealthy. But they have to deal with a wealthy person's issue, which is trust and security. Now, if you're a billionaire, you can have your head of security, because you're a billionaire, you have a head of security. Make sure that the people coming into your home are vetted and aren't going to steal from you. But with technology, now you can have a human come in and oversee the fish, but the Internet of Things camera network, AI, is watching what's going on, plus the blockchain reputation network is already
pre-selected this guy for you.
For the person that come in. So you don't actually have to keep track of that anymore. You just do trust the system to take care of that. Another possibility is asset management. That is clearly something for the wealthy right now. I need more portfolio taken care of, and I got this many $1 million in this portfolio, but it closes pretty soon, so we're going to need to choose a new investment direction for this.
Right.
Well, we think of that as a wealthy thing, but also you may have an E-Trade account with $1,000 in it. It'd be nice if someone oversaw where it should go to next. Now, for everyday transactions, or you don't want someone balancing your checkbook, or a lot of that stuff can be done automatically. But every once in a while, a human decision has to be made about where to go with what you're doing, and it's an opinion, not an algorithm. And if you want a human to do that for you, that could be a service that's applied also to the middle class as well. And again, all of this sounds kind of crazy. But it could be a lot of the things we think of as being really odd border case things for really wealthy individuals may end up being middle class in time. So that's...
No. I mean, the fact that things are that were the province of the wealthy become middle class is something we've seen forever. Think of cars, for example.
Yeah.
Cars used to be a thing where only the rich people had cars and only billionaires had cars,
But it's also predicated on the assumption. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was the tide that rose all boats, right? Nearly everybody got richer as a result of the Industrial Revolution.
Wealthier.
Well, yes, wealthier to be more precise. Everybody had more things and the ability to spend on more things.
Not during the transition, though. It's during the transition that dove a large percentage of the population into poverty.
Right, and it's not a given that you come out of the poverty.
Yeah,
right. It's not a given that the future is going to make people wealthier.
I agree with that, because predicting the future is, you can't say there's any givens.
Yeah,
but I would say that what happened was that what became was scarce in the beginning ceased to be scarce, but it didn't remove the idea of scarcity. Well, all that shifted was we went from a agricultural economy to a manufacturing economy, then from a manufacturing economy to a service economy, because those are the things that remained scarce. And so unless we lose scarcity, what's going to happen is that the market will simply move to the next scarce things. And I'm not convinced. It'll be very interesting to see where the world goes with that. Now, in the short term, things may go very badly.
Yes.
There's nothing about this discussion makes things nicer in the short term, but we'll see where it goes.